Hey, this is John Ridley. Welcome to Doc Talk. Matt Carey is away this week. He's actually in Amsterdam. He's at IDFA, and he is meeting people, doing interviews, hopefully having a wonderful time. Hopefully next week we will have some of the content from Matt's travels to Amsterdam and IDFA as part of the show. This week we have what I would consider to be a very special episode. As I've said before, we've had some amazing guests on the show. This week's episode is a really fascinating documentary. It's called The Wisdom of Happiness. And this documentary is, among other things, a heart-to-heart, a conversation with thoughts from His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. And it is absolutely amazing to hear him literally speaking in his own voice, telling his story, offering wisdom and perspective. It's a phenomenal documentary, and it's presented, and we are joined by the executive producers of the documentary, Mr. Oren Moverman and Mr. Richard Gere.
Brothers and sisters of this small planet, when your mind is a little bit disturbed, take deep breathing. Not talking about God, not talking about next life. This very life, just one life.
For me, as someone who grew up admiring and loving Hollywood, to have these two guests and to have the opportunity to speak with Richard Gere about something that is personally so important to him, and that is the Dalai Lama, his teachings, and the philosophy and the religion of Buddhism, as well as happiness and compassion and forgiveness. It's an amazing story. And what I really appreciate about the documentary, it works at its most fundamental level. I mean, truly as a wellness video about just how to get through the day. It's also incredibly historical about Tibet, about its longstanding issues and struggles with China. And also just the opportunity to meet and to understand the Dalai Lama, not just as a religious figure, but as a person and as a human being. It's a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. Here's our conversation with the executive producers of the documentary, The Wisdom of Happiness, Oren Moverman and Mr. Richard Gere. Enjoy. I want to welcome to Doc Talk the executive producers of the film, The Wisdom of Happiness. It's Richard Gere and Mr. Oren Moverman. Welcome to you both. Typically on the show, I say congratulations on the film. I feel like to the both of you, I should say thank you. This is a deeply profound film. I think in the times we live in, it's a necessary film. And I really think it meets the audience on several levels. But let's start with this, because a lot of what I know, frankly, I learned from your film. So if you can just start with the subject of the film, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and just explain to the audience a little bit about Tibet and its challenged, to say the very least, history with China.
The history of Tibet was complex as Asia was very complex. And there were, over the last thousands of years, obviously we know about the Mongols who controlled most of Asia, but the Tibetans had their time of controlling Asia, the Manchus, the East Turkestan. It's been a dynamic over the last thousands of years. So coming into the 20th century, the Han Chinese were fairly recent in terms of control of what we call China now. But China is a kind of a new invention. It's a strange kind of relationship that Tibet had with Mongolia and also with China over these last hundreds of years, probably 500 years. And essentially, Tibet was the priest class of Asia. And there was a certain relationship between all these countries, but there was not an occupation. But there was a relationship of some kind. And it's not really one that has a European precedent to it, but Tibet was an independent country. The Qing dynasty fell in the early 20th century, and Tibet became completely independent at that time of all influence of China. In fact, all of the emissaries, embassies, which did exist at that time, were told to leave. Then Mao's armies in the late 40s, the Long March, et cetera, Chiang Kai-shek was forced out of China. Mao and the Communist Party took over China, and the first thing they did, with the encouragement of Stalin, was invade Tibet. Tibet had really nothing to defend themselves. It was a purely Buddhist country. As I said, it was kind of the priest class of Asia. So it was quickly overrun. A agreement was forced on the Tibetans, the 17-point agreement, which was kind of ridiculous, was forced on them at gunpoint. And the young Dalai Lama, who was just a teenager when he assumed political control of the country, tried to live with it the best he could, and tried to have a relationship with Mao, with Zhou Enlai, with the other leaders of that incarnation of China. 1959, it became clear that it was not going to work out. The Chinese were quite brutal in their occupation. They weren't living up even to the points of the 17-point agreement that was very much in their favor. And there was an attempt on the Dalai Lama's life. And these demonstrations that came out on March 10th, 1959, which led to His Holiness escaping narrowly into exile. And he's been in exile ever since, living in various places in India, but then settled with the exile community in northern India, Dharamsala, in 1959, 1960, when it was kind of established there. This Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, has been in the forefront of what's been happening in Europe and what's been happening in the world since that time. We celebrated his 90th birthday this year. And this film is a document of his life, a testament to his life, testament to the history and the documentation of what happened to Tibet, and it's continuing with a really brutal occupation of Tibet. But as Oren and I have talked about a lot, when we started working on this film a year and a half ago, when it came to me from the Swiss filmmakers, the world has become so challenged that I think this movie is way beyond a testament to the 90 years of an extraordinary life, but a bit of a corrective and maybe even medicine for our time, that we can take a deep breath, step back, see who we are at core. And from the Dalai Lama's point of view, we're basically kind, loving, and compassionate. And it's kind of a call of action that we recognize that in ourselves and take the responsibility that we elect leaders who can lead us in that visionary direction of who we really are as individuals, but as a society, that we can live together and we can be kind and generous and loving to each other.
Yeah, you talk about a call to action. You talk about the visions in this film. As I put forward when we started talking about this, I felt like this is a film that meets the audience in so many levels. You can come to this film and just feel like, you know what, I just need some life lessons. How do I calm down? How do I get through my day? As you said, Mr. Gere, on one level, it's also a call to action. What's going on in Tibet has been going on and continues, even as you and I sit here and just talk. But it also breaks down, and I thought really interesting, the 14th, His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a person. And starting with that, and some things that I thought were really amazing, and I hope you can talk about this, and I would love for you to talk about how both of you came to this film as well. You talk about the French filmmakers, Barbara Miller, co-directed this film, Barbara Miller, as well as Philip Delacqui.
Swiss, they're Swiss.
And
Swiss.
Manuel Bauer, also, the three of them, but they're Swiss. They're all Swiss.
Yeah. They can't help it.
If you can talk about, many things can be forgiven, but it's what was it? The worst one was
Swiss
the
is still
cuckoo,
neutral.
the
I
cuckoo
can tell you
clock,
that.
chocolate and cuckoo clock.
Exactly.
But I found it really interesting for the Dalai Lama, as you say, a young person taking over such an amazing role. would cry when he got his lessons wrong and go home to his mother, and his mother would say, I just want my son to be well. So again, there's so much there. But if you can talk about how the film came to you, and maybe as well talk about the Dalai Lama as a person and the life. This is someone who has lived as a leader, and I put that in quotes in a bit of context, longer than even Queen Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
It's a long time. I had known this film was being made, as I'm aware of every film basically that's being made about His Holiness, and I've seen a lot of them. Many of them are very good. I'm always a little bit skeptical because everyone seems to fall in love with His Holiness, and rightly so, and they want to make a movie about him. And with the best of intentions, sometimes people don't really understand where he's coming from, and the history and the profundity of his own explorations into his own mind and heart, and how he's trying to express that and communicate that to people. And it doesn't mean they're great filmmakers either. So I knew this was being made, and my attitude was basically, look, when you get a rough cut, I'd like to see what you got. And so they came to New York about 1.5 years ago, and with a very good cut. It certainly was better than rough cut. It was something they were very proud of. And I watched it with my wife, and she was in tears, and I was deeply moved. One, by the filmmaking, but the central interview that they had with His Holiness the Dalai Lama was completely unique. Yeah. It's the first time I'd seen any interview like that had been set up. First of all, visually was so well done, but was using Errol Morris's technique that he developed, where there's actually a mirror in front of the lens. And it's actually something we used in a film that he did with Paul Schrader. It was actually about this technique. His Holiness is looking right into the lens, but he's talking to Barbara, who is one of the directors, off to the side. So we're having this incredibly intimate conversation with His Holiness. And he's really talking to a person, which is Barbara in this case, but he's looking directly into our hearts and minds. Yeah. And I've never seen anything like this with His Holiness, and there would never be anything like this again, where all the forces of the universe came together for this 1 hour interview with His Holiness, which is complete magic.
So I got a call from Richard Gere.
Oh, yeah. Well, then, so yeah, I said, look, I think this is incredible. I have some ideas, of course, as a filmmaker, of maybe how we can even make this better. And so we talked that through, and they said, look, yeah, let's try that. And I said, well, I want to bring my friend Oren Moverman in. I've made 6 movies with Oren, and we trust each other completely. And so I called him. He said, sure, I'd love to see it. He saw it, and he said, yeah, let's jump in. So the two of us jumped in. We got an editing room. We have a wonderful editor, Mike Sellerman, came in to work with us, and we just buckled in, tried a bunch of things, found new footage, kind of found a new tone, I think a warmer tone for the picture, and allowed His Holiness, as you were picking up, that he's a person, he's a real human being.
Yeah.
And he's an older human being now. He's 90 years old. And he's coming in to do an interview. So we brought in that footage. We looked at the original hour of footage, and there were so many wonderful things in it that hadn't been used. And especially the opening of him literally just coming to sit down and orient to the camera and say, look, what do you want me to do? Basically, I want me to look here. Okay. And someone, wipes down his brow, and he's just sitting there, and beatifically, and the voiceover starts. Yeah. And for us, it was very moving to find that and kind of establish a human connection to His Holiness, not a romantic one, but one that was deeply real and authentic.
I got a call from Richard, and I usually pick up, not always.
Not always.
No, and he told me about this extraordinary interview. He started with telling me about the interview and how the Dalai Lama is looking directly at the camera without his glasses on, which is also rare.
That's also rare.
And the effect of that, and Richard knows me very well. He knows that I have no spiritual life. I'm basically dead inside. And I think he knew that if I respond to this in the way that he guessed I would, we can work. There's something extraordinary happening. And I watched it and I was in tears. I
Mm,
was just so moved by the power, the honesty, the sincerity, and frankly, the politics, which is sort of more my background. And something extraordinary happened. I've never been in a collective of filmmakers before, but this was the first time where Barbara and Philip came to New York. We sat in a room. We looked at everything. We started talking about it. We got excited about new things. Then they found new footage. I mean, old footage, but footage that's never been seen in India, digitized it in Switzerland, sent it to us. We started this incredible conversation. And what's, one of the amazing things that I discovered in this movie is the idea of dialogue, the idea of just back and forth and discussing things and working through, spiritual, emotional, mental health issues. And this was a dialogue. This was a dialogue about making a film. So there was this technical aspect to it, which is sort of like, how do we communicate these ideas best? And then there was the depth of the content, and then there was the political story. It's not a political film, but that makes it a very political film in many ways, not just because of the history of the Dalai Lama in Tibet, but also the politics of joy, the politics of waking up in the
mm,
morning and resisting what is going on in the world with this positive energy that is based, on Dalai Lama's, experience, but also something they could give us. He's teaching us. Richard, in many ways, is my teacher. He would come into the editing room and he would just explain to me and Mike, the editor, he would explain what we're looking at and what the history is and what the thought behind it and the philosophy and very deep things. Frankly, I understood about 33% of them, but
mm.
they were incredible. So there was an energy to make this film in in dialogue with the energy coming off this film. And what we found out in finishing it and showing it around the world is that that energy is felt in the room where people sit
Mm.
in this room and they're coming from their stressful lives. They're sitting down within 5 to 7 minutes, the energy in the room shifts completely. And by the end of the film, they're transformed. And it's not idol worship. It's not any kind of like, this is a holy man. He himself says, the first thing he says is, I'm like everybody else. I just want to talk about
Yeah.
being human. To me, it was an incredible experience.
Yeah. And I want to point out for the audience, they should be aware because Mr. Gere, you've talked about being invited into this film and people wanting to lean on your knowledge. You've known His Holiness for about 45 years now. So a lot of what you're talking about, Oren, that personal feeling, which is really, really interesting. This film, it's like, oh, this is a dude, this is a person. I think when people talk about the benefit of what you've both brought to this, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. But it did feel very, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to sit down and watch a film about the Pope or the president. As much as I may love Barack Obama, it's going to feel a little distant. When His Holiness is talking about, yeah, when I was younger, I would get upset too much. And I would sometimes let my short temper, I was like my dad. It's like, think of LeBron sitting down going, hey, there's sometimes I don't feel like the greatest. There's sometimes I get to the line to shoot a free throw. I don't believe in myself. I'm more likely to go, oh, okay. When this guy talks about greatness, it's not an abstract because he is like me. That's one
Yeah,
of the things I really appreciate about the film. It wasn't, there are moments, by the way, where I feel like you're trying to unlock the secrets of the universe. But there are other times where it's like, hey, you know what? You had a bad day. Get on the phone, apologize to the people that you hurt. Talk about if you can. I mean, a lot of the ethos, it comes down to me. I thought it was really, truly, and there's much that you talk about compassion and losing suspicion. And I thought that was really interesting when you're not suspicious of other people, but you're curious. And oh, by the way, I love that the Dalai Lama is like, hey, I'm down for science. Faith doesn't mean
well,
you
I
can't
think,
be curious.
Mm-hmm.
look, I think His Holiness is speaking to a general audience here,
Yeah.
but I've been in, I can't tell you how many different situations I've been in with His Holiness, where he's talking to children, or he's talking to the philosophy professor at Harvard, or he's talking to a politician, or whatever it may be. He's talking to that person in the language they can hear
Yeah.
and from a life experience they can feel. So this was a very specific one. I think that His Holiness was speaking to a general audience. And you've got to understand that this guy has a Geshe Larungpa degree, which is essentially a philosophy, psychology, divinity degree, doctorate degree. And he still gets up at 3:30 in the morning to practice, to study, to analytically look at his mind and consciousness to set it for the day. So it's an ongoing process for him. The only thing that motivates him is to help us.
Mm.
So because that is so pure, and his bodhicitta vows are so pure, that it's easy for him to talk to a child, and a child feels like something special happened. And he talks to a college professor, and they feel like something special happened. He speaks to a nuclear scientist, and he feels something special has been communicated. That's how vast he is. And the trick for us, I think, was, again, to allow that simplicity to be there, but to not only allow, but to encourage the vastness of him to be felt, rather than kind of be assaulted with this wise spiritual man. So it meant that we needed to be filmmakers here and not just document this discussion, but actually help in the process of this, how do I say it, attending to different layers of possibility.
Yeah.
And so it's a filmic experience here. This is not just an interview with His Holiness, but it's an immersion in a mindset.
We should also mention that the movie is entirely in English. And so when Richard told me about the interview, he said, this is an opportunity to connect with everyone. This is not for the people inside the tent. This is really, it's not religious. It's not trying to convert anyone. It's really about what it means to be human and what is the wisdom that he could share with us about happiness, about this very, simple concept that is so complicated for all of us. And so the fact that the interview was in English and he was looking at Barbara, I think brought another special kind of quality. So in one way, Richard was making this film as someone who knows the Dalai Lama better than most people in the West, perhaps the best. And having that deep knowledge kind of warm up the film and really make it accessible. On the other hand, we have this incredibly unique interview that's never been done before and will never be done again.
Oh, that's it. This is a one-off. This is a one-off unicorn.
I felt that way when I was watching. I mean, one-off, I think, because of its unique style of the interview itself. I will say one-off as well, because you two have talked about the aesthetic. But I really want to say to the audience, I mean, this is a visually stunning film. I mean, it talks about universal things, but uses imagery that I don't think is pompous, but it's just both, whether you're looking directly at people who are also looking at the camera, who are just as human as anyone that you'll pass on the street. There's another moment where all these folks have their eyes closed, and it's like, what are you visualizing? And are we not all visualizing a beautiful, peaceful world where we walk in happiness? I mean, just what the things that sometimes sound crazy to say out loud, but they're fundamental. I want to walk down the street and just wave to my neighbor and say hello and have a good day, and I mean it, and they mean the same. But the visuals match. The magnitude and the simplicity are matched in an incredible way. But you do talk about, this is a one-off. This is an individual who is 90 years old. There are moments towards the end of the film where he talks about, when I pass, don't cry. You have the knowledge. You have it. You were born with it. Sometimes it's just discovering it ourselves. Do you feel like, and I'm not going to say manifesto in a striking way, but that this was an opportunity to present the manifesto of the 14th Dalai Lama?
Well, something extraordinary here. I mean, he basically was born in the 16th century, although he was born in the 1930s. Tibet was living in another century. It had been so isolated and self-consciously so. They didn't want the influence of the outside world. And through his exile, I mean, it's a story that I've often told, but I'll share it here. There's a moment in Kundun, Marty Scorsese's film about His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And we were able to show it to him Marty and I and a few other people actually showed it to His Holiness in a private screening, and His Holiness didn't really want to talk about it, and so we got some tea and we were talking. Then I said, Your Holiness, would you feel open to discuss this with us? He said, you know, the moment in the film where I left India, I escaped. I'm Tibet, and I ended up in India, crossed over into Arunachal Pradesh, and I came with my Kampa guards, with kind of these cowboy warriors, you know, got them out by horseback. They turned around and rode back into Tibet, and I knew I would never see them again. And I looked away from Tibet, turned around, and I looked into India. And I saw these faces I did not know. And I felt that I didn't have a friend in the world. And then he looked around at us and he said, you know, now I have friends everywhere. So this is someone who has known the pain of losing his family, his friends, his country, has been the father figure to 7 million Tibetans for all these years. And it's hard for us to even imagine how they feel about him. But it's so extraordinary. I've never seen a Tibetan be able to put it into words. It's so deep. It's not conceptual. But His Holiness's mission, especially talking to the West as he's done now for over 60 years, traveling the world, is basically the Tibetan Buddhist mission is to show us we have it all to begin with. We have a Buddha nature. We have this nature of kindness and compassion and basic wisdom. It's there. It's been covered over by habitual stupidity for generations and world systems. But we can uncover it. We can remove the dirt. We can remove the covering and the armor and get back to essentially who we are, which is completely interconnected to other hearts and minds in kindness and compassion. And I've seen this film now all over Europe and now in the US with audiences. I know people have seen it. They tend to see it on their computers or they see it on their home theaters or whatever. When you see this in an audience, and you have 100, 200 people there, they are different at the end of this, and they look at each other differently. His Holiness says, my brothers, my sisters. At the end of this film, hour and a half with His Holiness and the purity of who he is, and the genuineness and the humanity of who he is, the lights come up in a house, and people look at each other like we really are brothers and sisters. And the vision of possibility of how we can live together is real. And the challenge to us is it's real if we make it real.
I'm always inspired hearing this. I think a big part of that is credibility. I mean, this is a man who had to escape his country in order to save his people. This is a man who's dealing every day fighting cultural genocide inside Tibet by the Chinese. He's someone who...
Not just cultural genocide, real genocide.
Right.
Physical genocide.
Physical genocide, who speaks about human rights, who goes around the world, has opened up to the world Tibetan culture in a way that it communicates so many deep things in science and philosophy and spirituality and just the act of being human. And so that credibility, that is so powerful because it's not some guy with ideas. This is a guy who's lived through everything. And so when he talks about the environment, when he talks about feminist issues, and the movie moves very fluidly through these things. It doesn't hit you over the head. He just says what's on his mind. And these big ideas that are really about our future are just thrown at you in a very casual way, in this very adorable way. And I think that's part of it, which is he's not talking down to us. He's not preaching to us. He's not hitting us over the head. He's not being a politician. He's just being someone who has something to communicate and to enrich the lives of people, no matter where they are, no matter who they are. And that, to me, that was an incredible kind of kick to the head, was like, oh, it's just about being human.
The human quality and the ordinary extraordinariness is pretty remarkable. I want to ask you one last thing, and then I'll let you gentlemen go. It does. As I say, for me as an audience, you can come in and just, hey, how do I breathe better? I mean, literally, there are conversations about, hey, here's how you breathe better. But I do feel like in some ways it's a call to action. And as you said, as we sit here right now, there's a genocide that's going on in Tibet. What can people do? I mean, how can other people, raise their voices? It's great if we want to imagine a better world, but sometimes we have to do some things. Are there things that people can do to help get this message out? Where can we see the film? And what other things can people do to help keep the cause of free Tibet front and center for politicians?
I'm honored to be the chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, and we have an office, a strong office in Washington, but also in Amsterdam, Brussels, and Berlin. In the US, we've actually done extraordinary things, considering that we have no money, we have no power, we have no economic axe to grind. But it doesn't matter if it's Republicans or Democrats in power. We've been able to get bills through Congress that are the law of the land, protecting the Tibetans. And, I mean, we're not going to invade China. We're not going to invade Tibet to free them. But there's governmental things that can be done. By law, in any bilateral discussions with China, Tibet has to be brought up. It's part of necessary discussion by law. And that's since 2002 in the Tibet Policy Act. And we've been adding to that various things along the way. The latest one is specifically about the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama and where and how the next Dalai Lama will be found, and the stamp of approval given to that child. The Communist Party in China says that it's not up to the Dalai Lama, it's up to the Communist Party, which is, of course, ridiculous. But it's now the rule of the land in the U.S. that it's up to the Tibetan people themselves to make this decision and no one else. To talk to your Congress, talk to your senator, for sure. They respond to people talking to them.
I appreciate what you're saying. I hope and believe that when people see this film, that they feel the need to do something, whether it's just be a better person, breathe better, enjoy the day more, or really make sure that a better world in terms of how we interact with people, in terms of sustainability, that's a word the Dalai Lama actually uses, and just one where people, basic human rights are recognized. To both of you, I've been speaking with Richard Gere and Oren Moverman, who are the executive producers of the film The Wisdom of Happiness. I'm going to say again, thank you for this film. It's been absolutely extraordinary.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
After seeing this documentary, look, I knew about Tibet, I knew about the issues, I know about the occupation in China. Had no idea how severe, how extreme. I believe in human rights everywhere. We've got to lift our voices. It's a remarkable documentary in and of itself. But as Mr. Gere and Mr. Moverman were saying, it is also a call to action. Things only change if we get involved. I know we got a lot going on in America right now. We got a lot going on in the world. But please, part of the reason of doing this documentary is to educate and activate. Consider yourselves, if you've seen it, educated. If you haven't seen it yet, get educated on this film and get yourself activated. We'll be back next week, as we are every week. Our good friend Matt Carey will be back from IDFA. Hopefully, we will have some content from there, some terrific interviews with filmmakers, creatives, executives, folks who are getting documentaries out in front of everybody. Again, the end of the year is coming up, so we've got a lot of documentaries to talk about as we start getting towards the campaign season. Thank you so much for being here with us this week. We'll see you again next week on Doc Talk.